Good afternoon, everyone. It's the 2 o'clock hour. George Latimer, Westchester County Executive, on Monday, June 15th. And this is our 2 o'clock coronavirus update. Pleasure to have a chance to give you an idea of where we're at and where we're going with the coronavirus update, and then some other related information that hopefully will be helpful to you for all of our resident friends in Westchester County. I have with us here, I'm going to introduce him in a second, the mayor of the village of Pleasantville, Peter Scherer, who's going to talk about his community, some of the things that are happening there. You may recall that in the last month, we did one of these updates at the Pleasantville Village Hall, and we appreciated his courtesy in doing that. Now we wanted to make sure the mayor is on board to share some of his thoughts. As you know, if you're watching this at all on any multiple days, every day we ask a different mayor, village of a city, or town supervisor to join us and talk a little bit about their community. Westchester is very big, diverse place, lots of different types of communities, and we want everyone to have a little chance to introduce themselves to all of our friends across the county. We'll begin, as we always do, very specific with our statistics on COVID-19. As of the numbers that we have for today, we continue to see a consistent drop in the extent of infection in Westchester County. We're now down to 775 active cases of coronavirus countywide. At a peak, the number was 12,000. Just a week ago, that number was 951 active cases. So we've dropped over 200 active cases in the space of a week. And our active case number from the day before today was 809. So that's a drop of 34 cases just within the single day. 775 active cases of coronavirus. As we're testing, and we're testing very vigorously, we have now tested 212,982 Westchester residents. There are some duplicate testings in there, but it's not enough to really statistically change the overall number. On the basis of 1 million people in the county, that's 21.3% of the county that's been tested. That's a very high number. We're heading toward a quarter of the county being tested for coronavirus, and that gives you the confidence that when you're looking at certain trends, you're building the trends off of a wide base of information, not a narrow base of information. If you tested 5 people, 1 person had coronavirus, that may not be something you could project to the population at large. But if you tested 20% of 1 million people, and that's been spread out across the county, then you have a reasonably good expectation that the numbers are good numbers to work with. So in any event, 212,982 people tested. Last night, 37, or over the course of the last day, 37 people tested positive. So on a basis of testing, roughly speaking, 3,500 people in a single day and having 37 become positive, you're in the vicinity of slightly more than 1% of the people tested yesterday were positive, and that shows a decrease in the rate of infection. We're now down to under 17% of the people, all the people that were tested, that have been positive for coronavirus. That number was double that in the peak period of time. We were testing 1 out of 3 people positive for coronavirus. Now in the aggregate, we're about 1 out of 6. That's good news. All across the nation, you hear that coronavirus cases are spiking. Biggest single day in Texas, big day in Florida, big day in these other states. They want a period of time when we were spiking, where they had no action at all. And of course, they believed that it was a New York problem, not a nationwide problem. Now, unfortunately, we're seeing there's a nationwide scope to the infection. But just as it was when Westchester was first amongst the counties in New York State, we were first, but we were not the worst. And now New York State was first, but not among the worst of their experiencing. But we hope for our brothers in other parts of the country that they have an easier go of it than we do. We don't wish any poor luck on them. We do know what we've gone through. We're not through yet, so we continue to work. Overnight, there was 1 fatality. And the night before that, there were no fatalities. And that is not a statement that could be made at any other period of time since this contagion began. If you count what happened the night before that, the last 3 nights in the aggregate, a total of 3 people have passed away from COVID, 1 per night. And that is, of course, way down below numbers that we saw a month ago, 2 months ago, and so forth. To give you an idea on active cases, the last time we had as few active cases as 775 was March 19th. That's on the beginning of the swing of the curve when we were having cases galore, and we were hitting numbers very quickly that jumped from 100 to 1,000 to 5,000 before you could notice it. So now on the downslope, we've reached the point again where active cases are down. Our hospitalization number is approaching 100 people hospitalized for COVID compared to its peak, 1,200 people hospitalized for COVID. So all of those things are very good numbers, very hopeful signs. They're also important. A little bit later after the mayor speaks, we're going to talk about some of the things in Westchester County that we have opened and some of the things we intend to open. It's very important to understand that we looked before we allowed something to open within the county's authority. Most of this authority is a state authority, but when the county decided to do certain things in the parks and recreation, people said that action will increase the spread. And it's provable now that it did not increase the spread because we've gone 4 weeks, 5 weeks, and some of these decisions were made and some of these activities were opened up. But it's very important to understand we're being selective. We're taking those things that we think can be socially distanced, and we're counting on people wearing masks and washing their hands or sanitizing their hands and doing the right thing. And we're not always seeing that. And it's not just in New York City, which we all saw the pictures from over the weekend. We've seen it in other places here in Westchester County where people, for whatever reason, it's warm, they're cooped up, they've had it, they don't want to hear anything else about restrictions on their lifestyle. We will go back into the tank if we don't continue to follow proper prescriptions. As you may note, if you follow me at all, you can see I got a haircut. It took me how many weeks before I could get a legitimate haircut? I was very happy. I happen to be Roman Catholic. I was very happy that I was able to go to church in my home parish the last couple of days. The daily Mass started on Wednesday, Sunday Mass this weekend. It was a long time between being able to do that. A couple of places in the community I live in had outdoor dining. I was able to go out and have something outside with a friend or a colleague. The important thing to understand is that all of those sacrifices got us to the point now where we have limited number of deaths, limited number of active cases, less people hospitalized. If we turn and go the other way, we're opening the door to difficulties. Now, we know that because of civil protests, many people have gone out into the streets in close quarters, not socially distancing. Some, a handful of these events have been socially distant. Most of them have not. And it's very hard to deal with a large crowd of people. They're very emotionally upset over what's happened in the area of social justice. And to try to suppress that use of their civil right to assemble would probably be a counterproductive move. That's probably about the nicest way I can say it. So what we encourage people to do when they are in a situation like that, which we don't want to see happen as a general rule of thumb. We don't want people planning events for 150 people out in the street. But where there is a constitutional right to assemble, that will happen. And when that happens, we still want people to follow these procedures because it's critical if we want these numbers to go down, and these numbers are critical. I want to give you one other number to take note of. COVID tests are now free. You can get a test for COVID. This was not the case when this began originally. In the beginning, you had to have certain symptoms, and it was hard to get the test kits. It was hard to get tested. You had to go to one of a couple of centers. There was only one center initially, then two. Now they're much more plentiful. If you want to call the state hotline number at 888-364-3065, 888-364-3065, you can get information about where you can get tested for free for COVID. We want to test as many people as we can, understand what kind of contagion we have, and then go from there. So let us move to the village of Pleasantville. Pleasantville has over 7,000 residents. The incorporated section of Pleasantville falls within the town of Mount Pleasant, and it's close by a number of other communities. Briarcliff Manor is in close proximity, town of Newcastle, town of Ossining. Pleasantville really is a mecca for that region around it that's much larger than the incorporated borders of the village. The school district goes beyond the borders, the zip code. People have Pleasantville zip codes that are not in the physical village of Pleasantville. And it is a shopping mecca, and it's a restaurant mecca. It has a great Jacob Burns film facility, which drives people from all over the county to come. And of course, with that kind of a steady diet into a place like Pleasantville, the bookstores flourishes, the local restaurants flourishes, and so forth. Nothing's flourishing much now because of the COVID virus, but the mayor of the village, Peter Scherer, is with us here to talk about how Pleasantville has weathered the storm, where they're going, where they are, and where they're going. And I would also mention that Peter also serves as the head of the Westchester Municipal Officials Association. So when we gather all these mayors and supervisors that you've had a chance to meet some of so far here, Peter, for this year, I gather, chairs that group and has done a very good job of organizing. And of course, you deal with all different kinds of municipal organizations in the county with different interests that collide. So having taken on the responsibility to be mayor of the village, he's also taken on this additional association responsibility. So he's got a lot of things on his plate, but I'm very happy to call him a friend, and I'm very happy to have him with us here to tell us a little bit about the village of Pleasantville, the Honorable Peter Scherer. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, George. Thank you for that introduction. On the last point, my role this year is the president of the Municipal Officials Association in Westchester. I have had my term extended by 6 months, not because I've done such a fantastic job, but we can't actually gather to vote in the next slate. So happy to take that on and COVID continuation. And thank you for that, George, and thank you for all you and your team have done. I have many times in my now 19 years on the village board and 12 years as the mayor, been impressed by the support the county gives us, but never, ever, ever more impressed than by what's happened in the last few months. And by your leadership, it's hard to get in front of George, and I clearly didn't. He has a haircut, I didn't, so apologies for that. So Village of Pleasantville has come through okay. We're all struggling, as is every community. We by the statistics, had a total number of cases in the low 100s, a couple of fatalities, and have had a really very low incident, and indeed no incidents of new cases in recent weeks. That's all good news. I think almost certainly that is an incomplete rendition of what actually happened. It's funny, I was at the farm market this weekend and talked to a couple of people who say they were pretty confident they got COVID, and their doctor said stay home. Their son came over and cared for them. 2 weeks later, they came through it and have now had antibody tests which proved positive. So that's just an indication of the fact that there's more out there than is captured by the statistics, and that's important to take into account. So as County Executive mentioned, we're the home of lots of restaurants, and the Jacob Burns Film Center that has contributed to a vibrance that is a deep part of Pleasantville. That vibrance has disappeared with the Burns closed and the restaurants closed. We saw this weekend the beginnings of life as restaurants were allowed to open again on the weekend. Over this weekend, they were able to be outside. Also, as George mentioned, that occasioned some celebration and some relief from folks that had been cooped up, penned up, and were looking to get outside on what turned out to be a beautiful night. It also came along with some relaxation of the guards that we have all had in place, and some circumstances where COVID would be happy to be there and be exchanged. And so we're trying to message that out, recognizing again that everybody has to live their life, and everybody is trying to feel that there are moments to be out there again. But if we can all wear masks and all practice social distancing, we'll be a whole lot better off. It seems as though the research is now crystal clear that everybody wearing masks is without question a benefit. So we're not seeing that everywhere. Shout out to the high school and middle school age kids who have been relatively lax on that front. That's obviously a group that's hard to change a mindset about how they've always lived their lives when they want to be out and having fun, but that's an important concern of ours right now. The Village of Pleasantville made the difficult and unhappy decision a few weeks back not to hold our day camps and not to open our municipal pool. As some pools are now starting to open under very strict guidelines, folks have come back to us and said, well, Pleasantville, can't you do that? I think the important thing to drill into is that not everybody's pool facility is the same, and not everybody's support structure is the same. We don't have extra staff to manage social distancing and cleaning. We have a really very small pool and a very small deck, and if we were to try to separate people according to the rules, it would be a pretty small pool under pretty draconian circumstances, and it certainly wouldn't feel like everybody wishes it would feel, myself included, that on a hot night you could take the kids to the pool and enjoy a summer evening. So those have been difficult discussions. They remain difficult discussions, and I am both inspired by the conversations as well as exhausted by them, because everybody who comes forward with a concern is right. And we confront that right now with restaurants, people saying, hey, would you close the streets, turn it into a pedestrian thoroughfare, let these restaurants have more space for tables. We're actually going to do that next Saturday night on Wheeler Avenue as a trial of something we might then continue. But as probably most of you guys in this room already know, and many of our listeners know, every solution begets another problem. And we have folks who say, well, if you close the street, that causes a problem for me, be it the fire department or a laundromat or a restaurant that isn't in that area and says, what can you do for me? So certainly what we're doing 24/7 is trying to think out how we can help everybody, not only the residents in delivering the services and opportunities they want, but to help our small businesses who at this point have been losing money left, right, and backwards. And if there's a way we can find to crack open the door of viability for those folks, we're anxious to do it. So at the moment, the Burns Film Center remains closed, are looking at the possibility of being able to open in phase 4 maybe sometime into August. Lots of concerns about that on their side. I can't think of a more thoughtful bunch of people to be talking about it with, but at the point at which that happens and we have a new flow of people in Pleasantville, the challenges will change again. But as always, thank you for the leadership of the county. Thank you for the guidance we get from you guys and the clarity you offer interpreting some of the guidance we get from the state. We're in this together, and we've been in it together right from the start. So that is deeply appreciated, and I can say that not only on behalf of the Pleasantville Village Board and residents, but on behalf of the 45 municipalities in Wamoa. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much. That's Mayor Peter Scherer of the Village of Pleasantville, and thank you very much for your leadership, not only in the village proper, but also with the organization WAMOA. We have tried, I think, at the county level of government to see ourselves as a brother or sister government to the villages, the towns, and the cities, rather than a superior government. And in many ways, we're all creations of the state. And having served in the state legislature, I understand that many times when these things come down, they do apply in some way, shape, or form differently, but it comes from the same basic structure. So we try to work through these things together and try to be partners and try to find ways for us to accomplish things. I think that's what the average person expects. They don't necessarily care a whole lot about which level of government does what. They just want to know that some function is done and accomplished. And so to that extent, your partnership and friendship means a lot. We appreciate that, and please convey that to the rest of your village board and your professional management staff in the village. So we'll continue with a few other things that we hope will be helpful information on the COVID situation. We are in phase 2 right now. We're almost a week into phase 2. These weeks are supposed to last for 2 weeks in duration, and phase 2 opens up all retail facilities except those inside a mall. It opens up all the offices, real estate offices, law offices, administrative functions, and so forth. Outdoor dining, barbershops, beauty parlors. Churches are now available to open, although they have to limit their events to 25% of what the total capacity of their entity is. And that's easier for some and harder for others, depending on the nature of the religious institution and what the religious event is. Pools, we've mentioned. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Day camps. We also are looking at some of the low-risk level recreation programs, things like sailing and kayaking, tennis, that have now been added to the list of permissible activities. We in the county government, we'll talk about this a little bit more in a second, but we have had control of our recreational facilities during all of this. But beyond that, most of the decisions on what to open and what to close resides at the state level with the governor. The governor's executive orders closed the various entities and now is in the process of reopening. And looking at the statistics, we have a 3 o'clock call today with other counties within our 7-county region in the Hudson Valley. We open and advance as a region, or were we to backslide, we backslide as a region. And then at 3:30, Peter and some of his colleagues will be on another call to go over some of the local issues as relates to the county. We had a call this morning with school superintendents. So there's a lot of coordination going on. It may seem bureaucratic, but it's what's necessary to share information and ideas. Each entity has their own specific responsibilities, and we want to try to make sure that it works as smoothly as possible. I'll give you one example. The County Department of Health is required by law to implement the laws of the state health department. State health department establishes the laws. The county could also establish some additional ones. But it is the County Department of Health that has to go out and inspect and authorize and permit different activities. We know that both private and public pools are now in a position where they can open. But in order for them to open, they have to meet two separate sets of criteria. They have to meet the public health criteria that's established by the state, which the county has to implement, and now also the protocols for operating with less attendance. Just as Peter said when he was talking about the Pleasantville situation, our county pools are the same. We cannot open and function as we did in the past. We have to have less people there. We have to come up with a game plan on how we're going to sanitize or disinfect the various areas that people might touch or come in contact with while they're there. And that requires us to change the way the pools operate and put additional manpower and energy in order to make them available to be opened. And so those private operators, the homeowner associations that have pools, the private not-for-profit entities that have a pool as part of their arrangements, the school districts that have a pool and they lease it out to the local community recreation department, all of those pools fall under the same set of criteria. The state establishes the criteria and then says, you implement it, you enforce it, and if you make a mistake, you're the one that's going to pay the penalty for it. So the county is well aware that we have our responsibilities, even if we don't have the authority to make some of the decisions. We have a responsibility to try to help on our own and with the local governments implement these things. Also included in this list are day camps. All of those are open as part of what we're doing under Phase 2. Now, we're 1 week away from completing the 2-week period of time under Phase 2. And that then lends itself to, as you might do the math, Phase 3. Phase 3 will more widely open restaurants, where currently restaurants can open outdoor dining. Now it will allow the indoor portion of the restaurants to be open, but again, they will have to have less capacity than is normally allowable. And the restaurant has to put together a plan of how they're going to function with that lesser amount. Now, as Peter said, and many of the municipalities are looking at this, how they can help create additional outdoor seating right now during last week, this week, so that they can get some revenue starting to come in. They've been doing takeout, but takeout is nowhere near as profitable as in-facility dining. And of course, if you're outdoors for dining, that may be lovely, but if it's not a permanent structured outdoor environment, it's subject to the weather. And it doesn't have the capacity that the indoor restaurant does. So that changes in a week when Phase 3 starts and we open indoor dining as well as outdoor dining. And that's a whole other set of concerns that will have to be identified and mastered. Also under Phase 3, we're going to open nail salons. Now, when barbershops, beauty parlors, and nail salons were all closed, barbershops and beauty parlors were open in Phase 2, but nail salons were not. And the rigor to go through that will also come into play a week from tomorrow when we hit Phase 3, assuming the numbers continue to go well. Tattoo parlors will open. Tanning and waxing facilities will open. There'll be a host of different things under the cosmetology area. Spas will open. Personal services of that nature. And then some youth sports will open, lists like baseball. I think there's a couple of other ones I can't recall off the top of my head, but youth programs that will allow for some of those recreational functions to happen, which they were banned from happening up to this point. So all of those personal services things, the restaurants, the food trucks, the concessions, will all be open a week from tomorrow. And of course, that's on the basis that the statistics, of which I gave you the Westchester portion of it, but within the region that we continue to make those thresholds. In upstate New York, there are 7 regions north and west of us. They enter Phase 3 earlier this week. We have no indication that they won't do that. So as they start to go into the wider opening, and then it comes to the Hudson Valley next week, and then also Long Island shortly after us as part of Phase 3. Looking ahead 2 weeks beyond that, we get past the 4th of July weekend. On July 6th, we enter Phase 4, in which the categories that will open are much more general, and they have not yet been defined by the state. Arts, entertainment, education, recreation. There we're looking at larger type activities with larger turnouts. There will be graduations, high school graduations that can occur in the month of July, which were not considered appropriate to happen previously, but now they'll open up. There'll be a threshold limit. I believe it's 150 students, and there's a certain amount of spectators to go with it. But all of that comes in Phase 4, and all of that comes with the county trying to be a helpful entity. We have created a reopening committee, task force for Westchester County. It's chaired by restaurateur Louis Lanza from the Peekskill area and by Westchester County legislator Catherine Parker, who, aside from being an elected official, was a former owner of a small business for 23 years. So the two of them are working, along with Bridget Gibbons, who's our staff support, individuals to try to help go through all of these different parameters for operating. It's not easy. If you own a business, you have to change the way you operate to satisfy the state and file a certification that you saw the new requirements. But all of that has to happen, and the reopening committee's in the process of doing those things. We have a large group of people, and they're all very talented, representing a variety of business interests, business associations, and so forth. And they will continue to help us through. We think it's going to be, that their work is going to be more needed as we get into the areas where we open the more complicated type activities, where more people are involved, and it's harder to keep social distancing, and it's harder to do some of these things. When you have a very narrow set of things that you're opening, it's easy to manage that process a little bit better. Local government has been tasked with enforcing these things, which means that the villages, the towns, the cities, and the county government, states establishes the parameters. We have to administer them. And as you saw, the governor taking great umbrage from what happened in the city in Manhattan over the weekend and also out in the Hamptons, has been very clear that he will use the power of the state to withhold resources on those local governments that do not make a legitimate effort to enforce. So our general philosophy as a county government is to try to enforce with a mission of compliance rather than the mission of punishment. We're not looking to write tickets. We're not looking to fine and raise money. We want compliance. And why do we want compliance? Because we want the economy to open. We as a county government want to see the activity happening. It benefits us, to be crass about it, in the taxation of sales tax and hotel tax and so forth, but it also benefits us in terms of the general energy of the county coming back to life. That is our economic lifeblood. So we have to open, but we have to do it responsibly and wisely. That committee will help us do that, and they've already made some great strides. And everybody's being very creative. In a couple of days, I'm going to be attending the Rhine Neck High School graduation, which will be a drive-in graduation at Playland. Now, Playland has a large enough parking lot to allow for this staging and big screen, and the different graduates will be put up on the big screen, and they've got this all worked out. It's rather interesting and elaborate. We're happy that we could contribute to that. We know that in the northern part of the county, I believe it's North Salem High School, John Jay High School is doing a drive-in further up the line in Amenia at a traditional drive-in facility. So everybody's trying to be creative. How do we get around these restrictions, and how do we do things that'll be fun? Hopefully this week we'll be announcing some of our drive-in movies that we have planned for the summer. We're not going to be able to do some things that we wanted to do. Ethnic festivals come to mind, fireworks come to mind, but we are going to try to have other kinds of activities that we think would be helpful and creative. So I'm in the awkward position of urging you to do things that might seem at counterpoint with each other. And I very freely admit that this is a complicated process in each person's mind. To open up a facility or a service in phase 2, 3, 4, whatever, doesn't mean that you personally have the confidence to go back out into the society and participate in whatever that facility or function is. And there are some people on the continuum that wanted to do this 2 months ago yesterday, and they're prepared to jump back into the society full force. But without proper protections, that level of reentry to the society will turn off another portion of the society that's very hesitant to go back out and go to the restaurants and go to the stores. So we need all of that energy back to turn the economy around, which is why we try very hard to go through the protocols and implement those protocols, not because, I've seen things on Facebook page, you just want to control. I don't control anybody's life. What I want to do is make sure we don't backslide on the numbers. When we lost 75 people a night to COVID a couple of months ago, 75 deaths in a night, 50 the next night, that's what this is about. That's what this is about. This is about how do we reopen and not go back to that, so that we have tragedy and families ripped apart and heartbreak, wherever you turn, because this virus is a killer, and it's a faceless killer. So we try to be prudent. So we're urging you at one point, in one way, take protections and make sure you sanitize, do all the things that you have to do. You have to do those things. Don't be resistant to wearing a mask. It's not a political statement. It's a practical public health statement. And it's not forever. As soon as this is behind us, no one's going to wear the mask unnecessarily. But at the other side, you have to try to interact in the society, and you can't be afraid to interact in the society if we're taking protocol steps to make sure that restaurants are under proper direction and control, that retail stores are under proper direction and control. These businesses will collapse without your business, without my business. And that's why you go out and you sit in the barber's chair and you get the haircut that you know you need. That's why you go out if you can and have a meal with a friend or a significant spouse, a significant person in your life, in order to help the economy move to live more of a normal life. But to do that at the same time while you're taking protections. So it may seem to people on either extreme to sit at counterpoint. Let's go out, let's just open stuff up, let's just get back out and make money in business and stop bothering me with all these restrictions. No, I'm afraid to go out. It's still dangerous. The virus is still running rampant. This may not be gone for 2 years. Those extremes have to be met in the middle with a practical sense of, yes, I'm going to take protections because the virus is serious, but at the same time, I'm going to interact with the society because we can't afford for the economy of the society to collapse. It won't survive over that extended period of time. So those are two very separate things that we're trying to represent. For those small businesses who need personal protective equipment to protect their workers, PPE as it's known, the local chambers of commerce will be the conduit by which Westchester County intends to disseminate additional rounds of PPE. We've been doing this with the local governments now for a number of months as we get material from Albany and elsewhere. We've had masks that have been donated to us, and we've made it a point of going out to distribute them to churches, to municipal governments who give them out as they see fit. But now, through those chambers of commerce, small businesses' PPEs can be requested and received. Now, if you're a large business, you're a profitable business, you have multiple chain locations around the country, that's not who we're targeting this for. We're targeting this for mom and pop stores who operate at a very thin profit margin, and for them to go out and provide the constant PPEs that their workforce needs becomes another unreimbursable cost. We have a website and an email address to check with, smallbusinessppERG@westchestergov.com. I don't think you wrote it down, but if it shows up on the screen as a graphic, good for us. And if you have any questions, you can certainly call us at 995-2900. That's the general number. Ask for Bridget Gibbons, 995-2900, and she can help you get to this. But if it's on the screen, small business PPERG@westchestergov.com. That's an email address. There's also a website address. It's very long and complicated. If it's on the screen, great. If it isn't, you can find out by calling us. That's to get PPE. I want to make sure that we announce that the Beeline bus system is back to full service all across the county. In parts of the county, the Beeline bus route system is very minimal, but in parts of the county, the Beeline bus system is a spine and anchor for the way people have mobility, particularly in the southern cities of Westchester County. Liberty Lines and custom pins have gotten together to honor the various drivers, the members of TWU Local 100 who drive the buses, for being essential workers working through this pandemic. It's already been a difficult 3 months, but custom pins have very generously donated a little pin that indicates to those people they were essential workers and they've come through this essential crisis. And then also separately, they're raising money for Feeding Westchester, which is a very noble and good effort. We compliment Custom Pins for their generosity. We thank Liberty Lines for their cooperation as the bus system comes back to normal. We continue to have no fares paid on the bus system. We're still cordoning off the front of the bus to protect the bus drivers, so you're able to use the Beeline bus system without having to pay a fare. Fares will be reinstituted once we're through this, but enjoy the moment, and hopefully it'll get you to your job now that your job is back in business, and that will be helpful to all of us. On our parks front, we've repeated this many times. We're 2 weeks away from opening Saxon Woods Pool in White Plains and the Spring Ridge Pool Complexes, 2 pools in Yonkers, Hastings. We're 3 weeks away from reopening Wilson Woods in Mount Vernon and Tibbetts Brook Pool in Yonkers, and we have to get our protocol down on those. Croton Gorge Park, located in the town of Cortland, is open weekdays, Monday through Friday. It is closed Saturday and Sunday through the 4th of July weekend. The weekend demand at that park is more than we can manage or handle, and since we can't handle it, we can't afford to let that be a source of runaway contagion. So open Monday through Friday, Croton Gorge Park, closed Saturday and Sunday through the 4th of July. Our 2 beaches have been open, Playland in Rye Beach and Croton Point Park Beach over in the village of Croton-on-Hudson. Those have gone well for the 3 weeks they've been open. Bicycle Sunday continues. They were open the first weekend of May. We're now midway through the month of June. We're going to keep Bicycle Sunday going on in July and August, and then to September and October. Our 6 golf courses opened at the end of April, beginning of May, and certainly we've seen the continual downward trend of all of our statistics, so we know that whatever fears there were fears out there. There were people predicting things, that those decisions did not contribute to the increase of the virus. And our outdoor summer camp programs, they'll be reduced in number, reduced in size. They will open on July 6th, which is the Monday after 4th of July, Independence Weekend. In one other important piece of news, we are sitting on primary day a week from tomorrow, June 23rd. And there'll be a variety of different races, primarily the Democratic Party, although there may be primaries in one of the other political parties as well. Very important positions for which candidates will be selected who will be on the ballot in November. We have had reports of problems with the absentee ballot process. We know the Board of Elections has been required to do something they haven't done before, which is mail out absentee ballot applications, which get filled out and sent back, and then the ballots get sent back out to the individuals who've requested. And the closer you get to primary day, the more people are concerned if they haven't seen the ballots. Let me remind you, for our purposes here, there is early voting. It's a new thing that was created earlier last year. 2 years ago, it was in effect last year, and now in effect this year. There's early voting today through Sunday, nothing next Monday, and then the Tuesday that follows is primary day. And I would encourage you to early vote. I did myself on Saturday. I happen to vote in Mamaroneck Town Center on the Sound Shore. There's many other locations around the county. The volume was not dramatic. I could get in and get out in a reasonable amount of time. There was social distancing. There was plenty of hand sanitizer, masks worn by everybody. I went to the table. It was handled properly. Now, that doesn't mean every situation like this is going to be handled properly. There have been mistakes, and we are trying to identify what those mistakes are. The county government, the county executive, the Board of Legislators, does not control the county Board of Elections. You see county in their title, but they report more directly to the State Board of Elections. So I do not have the authority to give any specific direction to the County Board of Elections. We're going to work with them to solve the problems that have existed, to try to clean it up. But for you, the individual voter, if you haven't gotten your ballot yet, or your ballot came in and it wasn't the right ballot and you're concerned about what that represents, you can early vote. And I'll just say for the next couple of days, we'll mention this each day so you know, you can early vote. Well, today's not much time. It closes at 4 o'clock. So if you're watching me say this, you don't really have a lot of time for the rest of the day. But 4 o'clock early voting today. Tomorrow, Tuesday, early voting starts at 12 noon and goes into the evening at 8 o'clock. And that will happen again on Thursday up to 8 o'clock. So there's a little nighttime period of time that you can early vote. And if you want to go on our website or our Facebook page, Westchester County Government Facebook page, you will see a listing of the early voting times that are available and then also the various locations. Generally, the early voting locations cluster a number of communities at one location. So you might live in the community where the voting precinct is, or you might have to travel a community or two away. I live in the city of Rye. The early voting site for the city of Rye, the town of Mamaroneck, which includes the village of Larchmont, is in Mamaroneck at Mamaroneck Town Center. But I go down the Boston Post Road to, go to a diner, just go down the Boston Post Road, I go to Mamaroneck Town Center, and I was able to cast my vote in the primaries. If you live in New Rochelle or Pelham, you'll be voting at the City Hall Annex on Beaufort Place, which is the backside of City Hall in downtown New Rochelle. But Pelham and New Rochelle votes there. Up in the northern part of the county, at Somers Town Hall, both the town of Somers and the town of North Salem votes there. Somers Townhouse, located right in the heart of Somers, that's the location for that area. If you live in the city of Yonkers on the west side, early voting is at the Riverfront Library, right down by the train station. If you live on the east side, early voting is at the Grintonville Library on Central Park Avenue, just south of Tuckahoe Road. If you live in Eastchester or Scarsdale, you vote in Eastchester at the Eastchester Public Library. There's a host of these locations all over the place. You can also consult our information, find out what the locations are. And I encourage you, if you do get an absentee ballot and you've already voted, then your vote is counted early voting, destroy the absentee ballot. But if you receive the absentee ballot and you fill it out and you send it in, then you've done your job of voting. You don't need to vote again. You don't need to go out to either early voting or when primary day comes. We will mention primary day a little bit later in the process. We don't want to confuse things, but early voting right now would be the alternative to doing absentee ballot, whatever you feel safe doing. But I have to tell you, we have to go out in the society and function at some level. And we have to do it carefully. And going out to spend 10 minutes to vote at an early voting site, we think is an appropriate way to do that. So with that, there are other things we could be talking about today. We wanted to summarize those major points for today's purposes. Thank Peter Scherer for joining us. Catherine Chaffee, our terrific Director of Communications. Questions from the media?
Yes, we have a bunch here. So the first one comes from David Proper from the Journal News. We heard that mask wearing at Bicycle Sunday was far from 100%. Did the county hear any reports similar to that?
We did not hear that it was a particular problem. We do understand there was a large group that bicycled as part of the social justice protest movement, and that changed sort of the volume on it. So I don't have a report that shows a percentage of the number of people wearing masks. There's no way to calculate that. We'll make sure that we reinforce mask usage, but the reports that I did get back show that we still have well more than 60% of the people wearing masks. I think we were approaching 80%. It might have slipped back a little bit this past weekend, but it certainly was not an objectionable amount. Most people seem to understand that mask wearing is a necessity.
Okay, next question. Cuomo said the state got 25,000 complaints about lack of proper compliance opening up. How much of an issue has it been here in Westchester?
I don't think it's been a great issue at all. There have been some incidences that we've heard, but you know, when you really look at it, where most of the lack of compliance has happened with restaurants, it happens in areas where there is, you know, sort of a nightlife type destination reality. And in Westchester County, there are spots of that. You certainly downtown White Plains has an element of that. McLean Avenue in Yonkers has an element of that, but nothing like what you have in New York City, particularly in Manhattan, in some of the trendy neighborhoods of Manhattan, and then, of course, on the Hamptons, where you have a summertime crowd that goes out there. So I think the governor was really focused on those two locations as being particularly egregious. We have examples of it everywhere, and this is the process that we have to go through to educate, and then beyond education to enforce. And you know, we had this happen, you know, when we first started opening the beaches. Week 1, we had this much compliance with masks. Week 2, we had a little more compliance. Week 3, more than that. And I think that's what we're seeing in general. But, you know, you have to keep in mind, we're not going to send our people out there, particularly our police officers, to get into physical confrontations with people over these things. We are still trying to deal with the fact that we're asking people to do something they're not accustomed to doing, and you know, they don't necessarily sit around and watch media all day. So the reality is that they figure that they're in a certain quadrant and they don't have to do it. Well, we have to make sure they understand they do it. And we know that we have a particular issue with people of a certain age who don't feel that the virus affects them directly. And they also feel some sense of, you know, this is their social moment at the age they're at, if it's a graduation year and so forth. That doesn't matter, but we have to be able to reach those people and effectively get the message across that proper public health is to wear masks, sanitize your circumstances, and you know, conduct yourself with respect to the other person.
Okay, you touched on this a little bit, but he asks, what sort of enforcement is occurring to ensure that businesses are following protocols?
Well, we have, as I mentioned before when I talked about pools, we have our Department of Health is directly involved with certain elements of reviewing functioning of businesses. And we do that in general for public health purposes. Sanitarians go into kitchens and make sure that the food is properly prepared and that the conditions are clean. And with that, that permitting process, you permit the business to continue on. And then in addition to that, we also have a Consumer Protection Office that's involved with enforcing certain types of laws that do impact on some of the businesses that are opening up. We're using the general police function to observe and to enforce on the basis of a complaint. So basically, you, the individual, if you see a particular business that's open and shouldn't be, then you report it. You report it to the local police. Now, the county does direct policing responsibilities in Mount Kisco, and we police the parkways and the parks. So we don't necessarily run into business issues on the parkways and in the parks, but we do in the Mount Kisco element of what we do, and other police departments do. Keep in mind, we're dealing at a moment in time where police work has become a very contentious issue in some communities, in some neighborhoods, and discretion is going to be necessary as well. We're going to have to be able to try to enforce laws, including new laws that have come out of this pandemic, at a time when people are questioning the way we go about enforcing laws in general. It's a very difficult thing. It requires a lot of subtlety. Look, I think our police feel like they're under fire. I think the vast majority of our police are good people who follow rules, and they should be respected. There's an element of the police that have acted outside of what's appropriate behavior, and those individuals have caused a problem and stained everybody, and there's an argument that there's systemic problems. We have problems that we have to fix. We have problems that we have to fix in COVID. We have problems we have to fix in policing. We have problems we have to fix in affordable housing. We're not where we want to be. We won't be where we want to be in the last day that I'm in this office. We will be trying constantly to improve and to be better. But I think the most productive thing that a person can do, if they see that a particular business is somehow over the top, not responding properly, is to report it to the police jurisdiction that covers them. And then the police will make the decision on how they can alert the owner and enforce proper behavior. In the extreme, the governor has said he will pull liquor licenses for those businesses that don't comply. And a business will not function without a liquor license. A restaurant will not function if they can't serve alcohol. So this is not a joke, but there's no reason to ramp up to the most serious method of enforcement. You know that threat is there, and you make it a point to have contact with the people that are in charge of that. Sometimes the businessman can't control his clientele. And the clientele comes in and they're having a big party, and sometimes that has to be what happens. It's very difficult in this climate to know exactly how much influence to use.
And then as the last question, are county police expected to wear masks at all times?
Well, they're expected to wear masks when mask usage is considered appropriate, when you're within a close proximity of other individuals. If you're in a car by yourself driving, you don't need to have the mask up around your nose and mouth. It can be around your chin. When you exit the car and you become in close proximity to other people, then you pull the mask up and you have it under normal circumstances. I do the same thing. I have the mask off right now while I'm talking. There might be a picture of me where my mask is off, and somebody says, he's not wearing his mask, because the circumstances isn't the appropriate period of time. Where I'm standing right now, I don't know if you can tell on the camera, is I'm at least 10 to 15 feet away from anybody else in this room. So it is not essential for me to have the mask on now, but I will put it on as soon as I leave the podium. And I think that applies to police and everybody else in the society. And what I said a second ago, report violations, but let's be practical. If what you're trying to do is say, I saw Jim Smith not wearing a mask walking down the street, what are you trying to accomplish by that? I saw a crowd of 35 people not wearing masks. That's the spreading of the virus. That's what has to be identified so that those individuals can be, can be contacted and interacted with. But it's all very difficult. It's a case-by-case situation. We're asking people to use a lot of judgment that really depends on how the response is. If you go up to somebody and say, look, please put your mask on, you're in close proximity, and somebody says, oh, gee, I'm sorry, I forgot I left it home. Well, here's a mask. Or why do I have to wear the mask? Well, because you're protecting other people from your germs, as opposed to somebody who aggressively doesn't want to do it and is looking to start a fight. So you have to make those judgments case by case on the spot. Any other questions?
That's it.
Very good. Thank you for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with our COVID conversations in the morning, give you 2 o'clock update again with statistics. We continue to see things going down. We hope they stay that way. And I want to thank again Peter Scherer from the Village of Pleasantville for being with us. I'm George Latimer, County Executive. Have a good day and stay safe.